Ms. Meese,
Here.
Mr. Horn,
Present.
Mr. Oakes,
Here.
Mr. Waters,
Here.
Mr. Webb,
Here.
and Mr. Dalton.
Here.
Now I will open the floor for nominations for our chairman.
I'd like to nominate Nathan Hawker.
I'll second that.
So we have a nomination for Nathan and a second.
Second.
Move the nomination to be closed.
And the nominations have been closed. Well, do we have a second for that?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Meese. Robin, would you call for a vote?
Mr. Harker,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Ms. Meese,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Oakes,
Yes.
Mr. Waters,
Yes.
Mr. Webb,
Yes.
and Mr. Dalton.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Harker, I will turn the meeting over to you for election of vice chair.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Ragsdale. The floor is open for nominations for vice chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit Ms. Henderson nomination as vice chair.
Mrs. Henderson, is there a second for that?
Second.
Second, Ms. Meese. Any other nominations?
Move the nomination to be closed.
Nominations are closed. If the clerk would take a vote.
Mr. Harker,
Yes.
Ms. Henderson,
Yes.
Ms. Meese,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Oakes,
Yes.
Mr. Waters,
Yes.
Mr. Webb,
Yes.
and Mr. Dalton.
Yes.
All right. Unanimous, thank you. If you would, let's stand for a moment of silence. Gentlemen, if you'd remove your hats, and then we'll pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Hearing of the citizens. Has anyone come to speak to this board tonight concerning?
I do not believe anyone signed up.
Okay. Approval of the agenda.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve the agenda.
Second motion.
Motion by Mr. Dalton, second by Mr. Horn. Ready for a vote? Agenda is approved, 8 yes, 0 no. Approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion on the minutes?
Make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Motion by Mrs. Meese. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Waters. Ready for a vote? Chairman's report. I just want to thank you all for your vote of confidence. I'm for sure going to make some procedural mistakes, but I appreciate your patience, and it's an honor to serve with you. Some of you I've gotten to know really well, and I just want to say how blessed we were to have such a fine man like H.F. Haymore lead us the last few years. The time is 7:07. Ready for public hearing. First case, R-22-038, Myrtle Shields, rezoning from A1.
Can you read the zoning precepts?
I'm sorry, yes, I can. Zoning precepts, ladies and gentlemen, pursuant to Article 5, Division 7 of the Pennsylvania County Zoning Ordinance, we, the Planning Commission, have been empowered to hear and decide specific applications in support of said ordinance and to make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors or the Board of Zoning and Appeals. In accomplishing this task, we are charged with promoting the health, safety, general welfare of the citizens of Pittsylvania County. We must ensure that all of our decisions and recommendations be directed to these goals and that each be consistent with the environment, the comprehensive plan, and in the best interest of Pittsylvania County, its citizens, and its posterity. Anyone here to speak to the board regarding zoning cases will be limited to 3 minutes. At 7:08, case R-22-038, Myrtle Shields, request to rezone from A1 agricultural to R1 residential. Mrs. Ragsdale.
Case R-22-038, Myrtle Shields has petitioned to rezone 0.31 acres located on State Road 835, Pleasant Gap Drive in the Chatham Blairs Election District from A1 Agricultural District to R1 Residential Suburban Subdivision District to consolidate with an adjacent property zoned R1. Once the property is rezoned to R1, all uses listed under Section 35-222 are permitted. The staff summary is enclosed in the board packet. Mr. Chairman, Brian Shields is here to represent the petition.
Mr. Shields.
Good afternoon, I'm Brian Shields, I'm here to represent the zoning of this and to ask the blessing of the commission on this. It's just 3/10 of an acre between two family members, and we just asking that it be some R1. At some point, we will consolidate this to Myrtle Shields' property.
Are there any questions for Mr. Shields while we have him? No? Okay, thank you, Mr. Shields. Any discussion? Okay. Floor is open for a motion. Sorry. Case R-22-038 is now closed for discussion and public hearing. Is there any discussion amongst the board?
No discussion.
Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that case R-22-038, where they are requesting to rezone .31 acres to consolidate with an adjacent property, be approved by the commission.
A motion to approve by Mr. Waters. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Mr. Dalton. Thank you. We're ready for a vote. Request is approved. Recommended to the Board of Supervisors to complete this rezoning for the Shields with a vote yes 8, 0 no. Case R-22-040, Harold and Celia Hayden is now open for public hearing.
Case R-22-040, Harold and Cecilia Hayden have petitioned to rezone 6.59 acres located on State Road 806 Ivory Branch Road in the Callens-Gretna Election District from A1 Agricultural District and R1 Residential Suburban Subdivision District to A1 Agricultural District to consolidate with an adjacent property zoned A1. Once the property is rezoned to A1, all uses listed under Section 35-178 are permitted. The staff summary is enclosed in the board packet. Mr. Chairman, the applicants could not be here tonight, so I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Does this board have any questions for Mrs. Ragsdale?
I don't have any.
Hearing no questions and no one's here to speak to this, 7:13, floor is closed.
Mr. Chairman, in case R-22-040, I make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that this be approved as requested.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Meese, second by Mr. Horn. Is there any other discussion? Ready for a vote? Motion is passed, yes 8, 0 no. Case be recommended to the Board of Supervisors for approval. At 7:14, excuse me, screens, case R-22-041, Claudia and Willie Aaron, rezoning from agriculture A1 to R1 residential suburban subdivision.
Case R22-041, Claudia and Willie Aaron have petitioned to rezone 45.58 acres located on State Road 806 Ivory Branch Road in the Callens-Gretna Election District from A1 Agricultural District and R1 Residential Suburban Subdivision District to A1 Agricultural District to consolidate with an adjacent property zoned A1. Once the property is rezoned to A1, all uses listed under Section 35-178 are permitted. The staff summary is enclosed in the board packet. Mr. Chairman, these applicants cannot be here tonight either, so I'll be happy to answer any questions. I will say this property is adjacent to the one that you just approved. They are relatives, brother and sister, and they are trying to move property lines around so that house can be cut off and sold.
Gotcha. Okay, any other questions? Okay, floor is closed.
Mr. Chairman, in case R-22-041, I make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that this be approved.
Motion to approve by Mrs. Meese. Is there a second?
I'll second that one, too.
Second by Mr. Horn. Please cast your votes. Motion passes, yes 8, no 0. The next one is the special use permit, correct, Mrs. Ragsdale?
That is correct.
Okay.
The docket SML, we are moving to next month. We had some issues with placement of signs and height of signs as required by the ordinance. So since it was not properly advertised, it has been moved.
Okay. All right. Case S-22-026, Michael Eanes, special use permit for the placement of a single-wide mobile home in accordance with Pennsylvania County Code. Mrs. Ragsdale.
Case S-22-026, Michael Eanes has petitioned for a special use permit on 0.50 acres located on State Road 841, Whispering Pines Road in the Tunstall Election District for the placement of a single-wide mobile home. The staff summary is enclosed in the board packet. Mr. Chairman, Michael Eanes is here to represent the petition.
Mr. Eanes.
Yeah, I'm here to ask for approval of placement of a mobile home for my daughter.
Okay.
I already have a lot, so.
All right. Thank you for being here tonight. Are there any questions for Mr. Eanes?
Yes, I have one.
Mr. Eanes, could you come back up?
There's a cemetery on the lot. The cemetery is not on the lot.
Yes, sir, it's on an adjacent lot, I also own that lot too.
Okay,
The lot we're talking about is the lot to the right of the cemetery. The cemetery's not on that lot.
okay, because I was up there today and I saw the cemetery, but I couldn't tell where the property lines were.
Well, with the kind of thing I cleaned out the cemetery, that's the property line straight ahead.
Okay,
This land is to the right back from the cemetery to the top of the hall.
okay, I just wanted to clear that up.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. 718. Floor is closed to discussion on that. Mr. Oaks?
Okay. In case S-22-026, I make a motion that we issue a special use permit for this property.
Motion by Mr. Oaks. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Mrs. Meese. Please cast your votes. Motion carries. 8 yes votes, 0 no.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
can we go back to that? I misspoke and said it was a single wide. It is in fact a double wide. I just want to make sure that you all are okay with that, and you would need to make another motion, just
Okay.
clearing that up, that it is the placement of a double wide.
Okay.
Mr. Oaks, would you make another
Yes,
motion?
yes, sir. I'll make a motion that we issue a special use permit for a double-wide mobile home on this property.
Thank you. Mr. Oaks, is there a second?
A second.
Second by Mrs. Meese. Can we reload the vote, or we just raise our voice?
A second.
And come back in.
The move, there it is.
It's coming.
Carries moving.
Thank you. Motion approved. 8 yes, 0 no. Case CA-23-001, the solar ordinance. The floor is now open for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, in October of 2022, the Board of Supervisors asked staff to look at ways that we could amend the solar ordinance to place some further restrictions on solar development within the county. And they asked that staff review our options and then present proposed revisions to Planning Commission. And then with your input, that will be then forwarded on to the Board of Supervisors for their final review. So staff's recommendation is included in your packet. And these are revisions to Pennsylvania County Code, Chapter 35-141, which is the solar ordinance section. Those revisions, as you can see outlined in red, increase the 1 mile radius buffer back to 5 miles. That was changed in October of 2021 to allow for siting agreements. Staff is requesting that be increased back to 5 miles, and then also a 2% cap on the total number of acres within any single zoning district that can be approved for solar.
Any questions for Mrs. Ragsdale?
I would like to hear from Mr. Dudley on what the Board of Supervisors are thinking as far as solar. What I would like to see is the county take in enough funds from these large solar projects to fund a lot of the infrastructure we're going to have to be building here in the next few years, as far as regional, as far as a jail, new courthouse. 2% of the land in the county, with what I come up with, is probably 12,500 acres, and is, from what I understand, small solar farms just pay real estate tax In your large scale, they have to pay on the infrastructure. And so, if he can give us a little insight on what the board's thinking.
Well, Mr. Oaks, we had met, as Ms. Ragsdale had said earlier, and discussed these options right here, and then we wanted to come before this board and get the approval or disapproval, and then pass it on to the Board of Supervisors. And in our discussion, we didn't make no decision one way or the other, whether we was gonna change this. We had the options of changing this. And there is some solar projects, am I right, Ms. Ragsdale, that may generate some money in different stages?
Yeah.
There's several of those in the process right now.
That's correct. We
Yeah.
have 3 projects that the Board of Supervisors have approved siting agreements for. And those projects have submitted special use permit applications.
Do you,
So this would not affect them, this change.
do you know about what the total acreage is so far of permits that's been issued?
So far,
15,000. I want to
let's
say around
see.
15.
In October, it was 18,505.96 acres special use permits had been issued on. And that's total at that time.
Okay,
Now, that does not include the project that will come before you all next month.
okay. And so this 2% is in addition to what's already been done?
So it would be 2% of the total acreage zoned A1. So no, all A1 property, only 2% of that could be in solar. All M1 property, only 2% of that could be in solar. All M2 property, only 2% of the total acreage of that could be in solar. And then those individual projects could not be more than 5 miles within another project.
Okay, the only other question I have here in this amendment, it has utility scale solar facility. Are we talking about large and utility in here? Or should that large be added into that?
So large-scale solar is not solar and not energy that's produced and put back into the grid. So utility scale per our ordinance is projects that generate energy that is then put back into the grid, which a power company would then utilize and distribute. Large scale are gonna be like your large projects that are just feeding like a company. So they may have their own solar panels, they can be ground mounted, they can be roof mounted, but they only generate power for that one use. It does not go back into the grid, the overall grid system. This would include community solar as well. The state code differentiates between utility scale solar and community solar. Our ordinance and our definitions do not, because they generate energy that is then put back into the grid and they meet the size requirements for how our ordinance defines utility scale solar. We consider them all the same.
Any other discussion?
I have a question, and
Yes.
this may be the wrong meeting to ask this at, but since you brought up the large-scale solar, and this is, I guess, an educational point for me, to what benefit is it to the community at large for the large-scale solar if it's not going back onto the grid?
I don't have a great question answer for community as a whole, but it is beneficial. It would be the same as you placing panels on your house. It would reduce your electrical cost. It would be the same thing for like an institution. So the schools are currently putting solar panels on some of their buildings. We consider that large scale. It's not a residential use. It's an institutional use, so that falls under the large-scale definition as opposed to small scale, which would be something more like your house.
Okay, so I guess for clarification, something like, because there's a project that I can see from my kitchen window now that's going up. I'm assuming the very large projects, like down in Tunstall area and all of those are considered large or utility?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right, because I know when people ask questions about the solar projects, it's not favorable.
The
So it'd be
ones that
good
come
to-
before you all will always be utility scale solar.
Good. Okay.
Large scale and small scale, which are the ones that only benefit that single use, they are permitted by right for those uses. So
Good.
the ones that come before you are only utility scale.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's great.
Yeah. That's right.
Any other questions? This is some important amendments, and any questions you would have would be valuable, so.
And this is a public hearing, but we do not have anyone signed up to speak.
I know.
So,
Yeah, I'm always amazed that more people don't take advantage of the public hearing opportunity, not just during an individual case, but at the outset of our meeting, at the beginning, the general hearing. So, but nonetheless, we will all, I'm sure, receive calls every time a case comes. So, thanks for the information, Emily. Anybody else? All right, at 7:30, floor is closed to discussion. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt these amendments.
Motion by Mr. Oakes. Second by Mrs. Henderson. Ready for a vote? Motion carries by a vote of 8-0. And that brings us to old business. Any old business?
I do not have any old business.
How about new business?
New business, we will have a very busy meeting next month. We have 8 rezoning cases. Your sheet only shows 6. There are 2 that we left off of the sheet. So there will be 8 total rezonings and 3 special use permits. So we will be here a while next
Have a long
month.
meeting.
Yes, next month, we have a solar, and we also have our friends at the dock, so,
Maybe.
maybe, see. All right, at 7:32, we are adjourned.